Good morning and good afternoon to you, wherever you may be as you tune in today. And thank you all for joining us. For those who have joined us for the first time, this webinar series is focused on HR and workplace topics with a lens of talent, workplace culture, and learning and development. I'm Sonia Sapaban, CEO of OurOffice, where we help organizations with a full suite of products and services for making the workplace a better and more productive place for everyone. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Jordan Felby, Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Walker Miller Energy Services. Hi, Jordan. Ginger Leahy, Senior Director of Human Resources at AM General. Hello, Ginger. And Shanda North, Director of Human Resources at Hamilton Anderson. Hello, Shanda. Welcome to all of you. Before we get into the meat of this conversation, let's make sure you're familiar with some logistics. We use the Zoom webinar tool, and there's a few things here on this slide. Everybody's familiar with it by now, I think. It's an interactive webinar, so please use the chat function to provide your comments and any questions you may have. We have our colleagues at our office, Anushka Surif, who will be moderating the questions in real time and chiming in as needed. Thanks in advance, Anushka. We will answer as many questions as we can throughout and afterwards as needed, as long as you, of course, provide your email address when you ask your question. Also, please note this session is being recorded and will be available after the webinar on our events page at ouroffice.io/events. Last but not least, this webinar is approved for SHRM recertification credits. We will share the activity codes later, okay? So, Ginger, Jordan, and Shanda, it's great to have you here. To begin, I'm sure that everybody would love to get to know you all better. So, can you please spend a minute or two each introducing yourself and your current role, as well as your background and connection to the work that you do today and the personal experiences that have brought you to this moment in your life and in your career. So, if we may, Jordan, would you like to start?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, rather. My name is Jordan Felby. I use she, her pronouns. I am the DEI manager here at Walker Miller Energy Services. And my background is actually kind of cobbled together a variety of experiences, primarily in the nonprofit sector, where I did a lot of workforce development and digital equity, really all kinds of DEI initiatives throughout the Southeast Michigan region, including one thing that I had not previously mentioned to y'all at our office is the worker-centered workforce benchmarking program at Corporation for a Skilled Workforce. So I think there's a lot of interesting takeaways and connections there as well that have led me to this moment. So thank you all for inviting me to sit on this panel, and I'm really excited about this afternoon.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Ginger, would you like to go next?
Hi, Ginger Leahy, Senior Director of HR with AM General. I have been with AM General almost 23 years. We actually build the military Humvee and recently been awarded a new contract to build the JLTV, Joint Light Tactical Vehicle. We will be hiring over 100 new frontline employees yet this year. I did start in recruiting for AM General 23 years ago at our former H2 plant. We built the Hummer H2 for GM. I transitioned into labor relations after a few years, and I've been managing the administration of the collective bargaining agreement for the UAW Local 5 employees that we employ for over 12 years now. We have over 350 frontline employees that support our production in Indiana and Ohio, and we'll continue to hire the rest of this year and into next year. So what's brought me here today is our relationship with Sonia and OurOffice. So a few years back, we started that relationship, and we've built a great working relationship and look forward to continuing that throughout the years. Sonia and her team have helped move us along in our DEI movement over the past few years. So appreciate the invitation and look forward to the rest of the session.
Oh, thank you so much, Ginger. And I remember back in 2019, I think it was, or in thereabouts, when we started. And I remember the first time we visited you, where we were chased out by the big storm. We literally made the last flight out. The storm was hitting your area there. But thank you for being such a great partner. And in full disclosure, we don't usually talk about this, but everyone on this call is a user of OurOffice, and we really appreciate that. We work with great organizations in over 24 industries, and so we're really fortunate to have incredible leaders that we can always ask to join us. So thank you again for the partnership and for everything you've done. You've been amazingly innovative and engaged, and we really, and it shows in the work. And this major contract that you all won, which if somebody doesn't, if people don't know, if you look at it, I think it's a testament to everything you've done with what a great workplace you've built to attract the talent and attract the customers. And it's the biggest prize contract that was in competition for many years. I know from coming from that industry myself that everybody was trying to win this JLTV contract, and you finally got it. So again, a lot of great things happening there. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And Shonda, please, if you would give a short intro.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shonda North. My pronouns are she and her. I am currently the Director of Human Resources at Hamilton Anderson Associates in Detroit, Michigan. It is an architecture firm. I have over 17 years of progressive human resources leadership experience, starting from an HR assistant to a manager to also generalist work, as well as Director of Benefits, Director of HR, and Director of Training. So I've worked for and led initiatives and organizations from 40 employees all the way to 3,000 employees. And my experience in developing training for frontline employees, as well as leading employee relations and performance management for frontline employees as well, and working directly with the leaders on those initiatives.
Thank you so much, Shonda. It's been a pleasure also partnering with you and all the great work you do, and everyone here. So I want to intro the topic for our audience for a moment before we get into some questions and getting your ideas. It's no secret with all that's happened the last few years. Many things in the workplace have been turned really upside down, right? And we have all become more aware, I think, of some gaps and issues that were always there, but now have been magnified. And one of those is the importance of frontline workers. It's become really more apparent, I think, to everyone. And as the office has become more hybrid, as they say, right? These workers feel even more isolated often. And this has made the issue of frontline engagement and retention even more apparent and more critical than ever. So that's why we're focusing on that today. Here is a few stats. Everybody knows I'm guilty as charged. I'm an engineer and I love data. So I always share some data. So first of all, it was actually a little bit surprising to me that about 112 million workers, or 70% of the working population in the US, are frontline workers. Historically, many have come from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds. They're disproportionately women, people of color, and people older than 50. They often work long hours, and often they need more hours, actually, to make the ends meet. Retention and engagement levels have historically been low at the front line. Poor communication is a leading factor in employee turnover, with about 41% of employees citing it as a major reason for leaving their jobs. Also, according to McKinsey, if I recall, there's like 34% of these employees who left their industries. They cite flexibility as an issue for leaving. And a little over 30% list the lack of career development and opportunities as a reason for exit. But by the time they exit, it's too late, right? So if you're feeling a bit depressed by these stats, let me share some good news, right? The good news is that when they feel engaged and well-informed, these employees are 4.6 times more likely to perform at their best, which has been shown to lead to over 20% higher profitability. So that's good news, right? So there's also, I mean, it makes the issue even more critical, right? So how do we get there? So that's why we have an expert panel. And Jordan, I'd like to start with you, if I may. What are, from your perspective, tell us a little bit about your frontline employees. How do you define that? And what are the primary challenges and barriers that you have personally experienced in your roles or observed when communicating and engaging with frontline employees in your current or previous role?
Yeah, absolutely. In my current role at Walker Miller, we have kind of a variety of frontline workers. We have our customer service experts who work in the call center, who are engaging with clients and customers on a daily basis. We have our workers who are out in the field. We have, technicians who are out doing energy audits and assessments of properties, as well as working with our retail clients to go out and host events at our different retail partners and bring energy efficiency materials out there. We also have our outreach workers who are doing events and engagement directly with residents out in the field. So we have kind of a variety of different frontline workers who are doing different types of engagement tasks with the clients and customers that we serve. So as you can probably tell by the fact that everybody's doing kind of a different thing in a different place, some people are kind of tied to a desk and, they're on the phone all day. And then some people are out driving in their car, going to, from home to home or from business to business. There's a lot of different moving parts, and it makes communication sometimes a little challenging. And I would say that has been true in every role I've ever had. Communicating effectively with frontline workers can be a challenge for sure. And identifying what way is going to make the most sense for that particular kind of role group, I think is really important. So identifying, is there a tool that people are already using when they're out and about, working in the field? And that might be the best way to communicate with that particular group. The folks who are out doing events, they have their cell phone with them. The folks who are out doing field assessments usually have a tablet with them. The folks who are taking calls are using specific software on their computer. So really identifying what are the best ways to communicate with those different folks is really key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Ginger and Shonda, would you like to add to that from your own perspectives? Where do you see the challenges? Maybe Ginger, if you want to go next.
Sure. So I would define our frontline employees as the employees that are on hourly side, tied to the line. We also have frontline supervisors, but so we do have some challenges. We have some technology barriers, not obviously, but our frontline hourly employees have little to no access to any technology. They do have an app which affords them to make some personnel changes, but typically just look at their weekly pay stub. So in communicating with them, there's a lot of paper postings. Do they or do they not see that? Is there communication that is directly from their supervisor? And then another barrier may be them looking for communication, not with their supervisor or HR, but their union representatives. Right, wrong, or indifferent, no offense to them, they may go directly to the union reps before a supervisor and or human resources to get information. And so it could be, there could be some challenges there with what that information may be. So I would definitely say technology is our number one barrier at this time with communicating, and sometimes even to the frontline supervisors as well. They have access to more technology, but they're also tied for the most part to the line. So a majority of our frontline hourly employees are in a station online 8 hours a day. And then the supervisors are, for the most part, in those areas and tied to that area all day long. So.
Yeah, awesome. No, thank you for sharing that. And we can see the diversity of Frontline, because when we think of Frontline, we think of, everybody has their own maybe view of it. And some of this conversation is really helpful to see how many different types, from the call centers to the field people doing outreach, in a retail setting to, Frontline actually on the floor,
Mhm.
the manufacturing or assembly situation. Shana, how about you? Yours is a little bit, do you have other experiences too?
Right. So, currently being in architecture, our frontline team members are actual architects and designers, landscape and interior designers. However, I do have experience in the human services field where you have therapists and counselors and social workers, as well as peer aides, those who are working directly with the homeless in the homeless center where they may only have one or two computers to share, to what gender, has shared, where you have to be more present and active and print out things and have those relationships with the frontline managers to make sure that you're able to communicate. I also have, experience with ThyssenKrupp materials in the manufacturing industry because they are on the line. They have, dedicated break time to be, on and off. It's not as easy. They don't have time to, maybe sometimes even sit and read a benefit enrollment packet, right? So, using those, methods to mail things home, or, I remember Jordan sharing about the text app, that employees have to, voluntarily opt into is extremely helpful. So using technology to be able to reach your team members, but the truth is, to Ginger's point, you may have to print out that sheet of paper and post it in several areas, as well as communicate or fly out or drive out to the location to actually conduct the enrollment meeting or just be present. I would have, hours where I'm just available. Hey, I'm going to be here on this date during this time. I give, 3 different dates depending upon the shifts. And I'm there and I'm just sitting in the one office that they have at their location with 30 employees, right, who have one computer to help people to enroll or to share information. So I've found that, oftentimes in general, when it comes to what I've experienced in those different environments, when it came to culture and change, oftentimes team members just don't feel heard, right? Team members as well as frontline leaders, oftentimes they feel like, hey, you're in the office, you don't understand, what the real work is like. You're not out here, in the face, and you want me to be available to do this and that and to learn, but you don't understand. So especially if we have system changes, technology changes, policy changes, just always keeping in mind, how is that going to affect our frontline employees? How is that going to affect our frontline leaders who have to communicate it and also hold people accountable? So I think making sure that there's opportunities for our frontline employees as well as leaders to be heard, especially when there's a thought about a policy change or a new process or new technology or even a training. How are we making sure that we're having a collaborative relationship, so that way you're also building a standard of trust as well?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you for pointing out some of those specific things that you really want to let them know, but then it's really hard to communicate that. So before we talk about, well, how do we address that, let's even talk about, how do we currently measure even engagement and retention among the frontline workers, and what does the data say, right? So Ginger, I know you have lots of data and you look at it. So do you want to start with that and tell us a little bit about how do you measure at AMGenor?
Sure. So we do an annual engagement survey with that includes the frontline hourly employees as well as all of our salaried employees throughout the corporation. And then we also do a safety perception survey. So what we see on the hourly side is some technology barriers along with, to Shonda's point, some trust issues, right?
Mhm.
So the easiest way to conduct these surveys would be for them to scan a QR code, but then there could be some issues where they think we're going to track them in some manner on their personal phones. The one time they did trust the QR code is when they had to add the app to their personal phones to then be able to review their pay stubs. So that was a success. But when we do the surveys, we're right back to the paper forms. We pull them offline. You know, we shut down production at various times for various lines, pull them into a location, have them complete the survey because their feedback is important, and we would like to institute any ideas they may have. Sometimes they don't want to fill out the survey at all as well. So some of the gaps we've identified is whether or not they fill it out to begin with. Number one, on the salaried side, it's an email with a link, and people are overburdened with emails and they may get lost, so they may just never complete it. But where we see some issues is then not getting the feedback to them, especially the frontline hourly employees. Or if the feedback gets to them, it might be untimely, which could be discouraging as well. So what we've done is we also have seasoned employees with an average of 20-some years seniority, and then we have a group of brand new employees that have never worked for AM General. And to deal with some of those issues, we have implemented an orientation and keep those employees offline for 5 full days and give them a separate set of orientation and training before they go to the line and get their feedback, and hopefully improve the retention of those new employees that may have never worked in this type of setting. There's a lot of RV manufacturers and boat manufacturers in this local community, and it's just a different type of manufacturing. And so they may not be used to being tied to a specific station all day, except for their break. So we're trying to give them a dose of reality before they go to the line. And these are the tools, and these are some of the activities you will be doing to help kind of close that gap and improve that retention and improve engagement.
So if I understand it, when they first get there, the first 5 days, you're doing 5 days of orientation, which is a long time, relatively speaking, right? And
Yes.
And then you talked about the seasoned employees with 20+ years experience. Are they, I mean, if they come with that kind of experience, do you not put them through the same orientation? Are they involved in that orientation with the other employees?
So that's a good point. So at this point in time, no, but some of these employees will transition to jobs where they're being trained on the job by other employees, not a supervisor, not an engineer. So a lot of this training is for the new program, and it's specific to that build outside of the Humvee build. But some of those employees may end up side by side in the Humvee operations with these seasoned employees. So that is a good point. I will add that to the list.
So yeah, so the seasoned employees, you mean seasoned employees in the industry, not necessarily at your company?
Well,
Or do
seasoned
you-
employees at our company, right? So
Your company.
for the Humvee production, those employees, for the most part, have 20+ years of seniority. We did hire a group of people last summer, but now going forward, most of the hiring will be for the JLTV vehicle, which is a different build, different vehicle, different style of build. And most of the orientation is geared towards that production. But at the end of the day, they could end up being on the Humvee line, which would be different. So I think that's a good point of somehow at some point including some of those employees going through that orientation as well.
Yeah, so the Humvee seasoned employees to be included in the orientation with the new ones that you're hiring for JLTV. Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, because at least the seasoned employees know some of the basics about your company, right?
Exactly.
And so maybe not the whole 5 days, but they could be kind of joining them along the way. And I always think it's so wonderful to have seasoned employees and new employees together anyway, right? During that early orientation when new employees are forming their opinions about the organization, right? It's known that what they see and do in the first week sometimes, right, impacts their perception of the organization for the long term, and whether they decide they're going to stay here long term or not. I mean, the first 30 days, most people decide, oh, this is, I'm going to be here a long time, or I'm not. Now, that's not always 100% happens that way, but still, I mean, people form, it's like first impressions that matter, right?
Exactly.
Jordan, do you want to share a little bit on this too? I mean, this is an important topic about how you measure and what gaps do you identify per the data?
Yeah, so we do conduct an annual, like kind of overall engagement survey to measure organizational culture development, how the core values kind of show up in people's day-to-day work, and then at an organizational level. So we do have kind of an overall measure of kind of the health of the organizational culture that we utilize to get feedback from folks across the organization, both frontline workers, folks who are working in the back office, that's across the entire company. Then we also do some pulse surveys and kind of quick check-ins as we are undertaking new initiatives or working with specific groups of employees. One thing that really jumped out to me, Ginger, about what you were sharing was kind of that importance of utilizing some of those more seasoned workers as kind of those role models and those examples, having them be available during that onboarding and orientation period. And one thing that we have recently kind of introduced is a buddy program for our new hires. So folks who are coming on during that orientation period, for those first like 60 to 90 days, pairing some of those new workers, especially, folks working on the front line who might feel a little bit more isolated or disconnected as they are, getting trained up and then sent out into the world, to go work on a thing sometimes by themselves, to make sure that they have a really strong relationship with folks at the company who have a little bit more experience, who can address any of those issues, answer any questions that they might have, and really build up that trusted relationship. Because another thing that jumped out at me, Ginger, about what you were sharing is that sometimes folks would go to the union rep rather than going to their supervisor because there's a level of trust there. They trust that this person knows what's going on and that they are like on their side and that they're going to give them the correct information or be able to support them when they're dealing with an issue or a question or concern. And we really want to make sure at Walker Miller that people have that kind of relationship both with their direct supervisor, if at all possible, their people leader, but also with their buddy, and also with me and other folks kind of from the HR side. So they feel like they have a variety of people that they can go to at the drop of a hat and get those questions answered. Again, especially if they are, out and about and might not feel like they have, quick access to people in the same way. So that's one of the ways we're identifying and addressing some of those gaps.
And Jordan, how do you get the annual engagement survey to the front line?
Yeah, so we use, and Shonda, thank you for mentioning the call multiplier text messaging system that we use. So we do have people when they are hired kind of opt in to receive those text messages, and that has been a huge advantage to making sure that we're able to reach folks across the organization. Because, as other folks have shared, even the folks who are working in an office and at a computer all day, things can get buried in emails so quickly. It can be so hard to kind of collect data from folks. So we use the call multiplier text messaging system to send out texts as like a quick blast to everyone with just a link to the survey so they can take it right on their phone. We make sure that all of our survey tools are very kind of mobile friendly, mobile first design, so that they can be taken quickly and easily from any device that people might be using, no matter where they are, if they're out in the field, if they're sitting at their home office, if they're at one of our different office locations. It should be quick and easy to kind of do that data collection. We also use Teams as our kind of workplace platform. And when we have our kind of large group meetings, we have the polls feature so that we're able to do very quick hit polls during some of those larger team meetings to check in about how is a new initiative going? How are the performance reviews going? Any kind of question that we might have to identify where a problem might be happening, we're able to do those quick polls in Teams.
And so for both the survey link that you send them and Teams, they have to have login information though, right? Like
So
email
for
or something?
Teams, yes, everyone who is employed at Walker Miller does have a company email address, so they are able to access their Teams account through that. It's a Microsoft 365 single sign-on kind of a situation. Yeah. And typically we also do the surveys through Microsoft Forms. So they are able to, access that link as long as they are signed into their, company email on whatever device they are using. However, we are exploring some other options for quick hit surveys that would be, totally text-based. So you could just literally like type back 1 through 5 or something like that to do like really quick hit surveys. So if anybody has any tips about doing super quick surveys on a phone, let me know.
Well, and this is completely like in real time, right? I didn't know you were going to say that, but we actually have a tool called Trivi, right? It just so happens, right? It's
yes.
back in our suite of tools, right? And it is actually completely text-based. No email, no nothing necessary. But I'll tell you a little bit background. I mean, as you know, of course, our panelists know, and some of our audience know, for years, our company has been focused on equity, inclusion, and wellness, both for employees and for organizations. I mean, wellness of the organization. And so recently we became focused on the widening gaps in the workplace and in society, that directly impact economic inclusion of specific communities and also our national economic wellness in terms of competitiveness, and our safety and security depend on this, right? And so for frontline workers, which, as we just said, are in many cases left out and not heard, this is an example of that gap that has come more and more into focus for us because it really impacts their ability to be heard, so their needs can be met. And so ultimately, this impacts their growth and economic wellness, right? So it is connected with this overall focus that we've had. But again, it also impacts the economic wellness of our nation, as sometimes people opt out of these type of jobs altogether because it's just too hard, right? It's easier to find a job that you sit at home and do some things, maybe digitally, or you drive an Uber, or you do whatever you do, but and so that's why, for example, in manufacturing alone, I think there was a number that, if I remember correctly, that we're missing close to like 4 million frontline workers in the next 10 years. So this is not even just, here are these frontline employees, we got to do something about it. It's like people are not coming into these jobs because, they see this widening gap between people that have office jobs or stay-at-home gigs or even things like Uber and that, and they have other options. There's just many other options that seem easier. And even if they come from families that generationally, people have been in these kind of industries and they'd like to be in that, right? So we really need to take action to fix this. And so that's why, we have our newest product line, that's Trivi, is a completely text-based communication tool that makes it super easy to get feedback, and then to also have ready-made actions for managers that they can take in the moment to improve, to get that feedback. As I think Ginger was saying earlier too, I mean, one thing is just getting their feedback. The other one is getting feedback to them on what we did with their feedback, right? And that is very important because that encourages them to do more of that. Otherwise, they'll just not engage the next time you're trying to get their feedback. They're like, for what, right? And many times what we found is that the company is actually doing something about it. It's just people don't know. Or if they hear about it, or if it's communicated, again, you're having trouble communicating with people to get their feedback, but then you're also having trouble for the same reasons, tech access and digital barriers and just the nature of their work being tied to the shift, being tied to the line, that they just don't hear about what's been done about that. So it's like a double whammy. And that adds a little bit of a vicious circle in terms of people engagement and retention. So let's turn. Oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump off of that. One thing I wanted to share that I think has been really effective in terms of sharing that feedback back out and sharing what we're doing about it is that we do have a monthly all staff meeting that is scheduled in such a way that everyone is able to attend it. So, and that folks who are, out in the field or in other office locations are able to call in. We've made it very, very accessible for folks. And we always share at that monthly all staff meeting any anonymous feedback that we have received. We, share it out loud and what we're doing about it. We share any survey results that we have, currently going on and what we're doing about it. We make sure that that is available, that information is available to everyone across the organization, no matter what their role is. And I think that that has had a huge impact on people feeling comfortable to actually share that information because they know that they are heard and that we are doing something about it and that we're telling them what we are doing about it. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a technique that I think has worked really well.
That's amazing. I think taking the time to do that, sometimes it's just busy, right? And people just don't have time to do these things and to, basically shut down the line or have everybody come in to do that, right? And also, I think as you grow, it becomes harder, right? I mean, we see, and to the extent you'd like to share, please feel free to share it as we go along about the number of locations you have, number of people, because, we have, I think the smallest company we've worked with had 7 employees when we started. And then the largest, of course, thousands, right? And the challenge is, there are these break points, right? Where the organizational persona changes, right? And profile changes, and all of a sudden some things that work fairly well start not working, or because there are more resources available, the organization can do some other things which smaller organization can't do. We've historically been focused on small, medium businesses and the mid-market. Because we feel like there's lack of resources and flexibility that much larger organizations have. But then we've also ended up obviously with very valuable, much larger customers who have a very different kind of set of challenges, right? So the scalability of these approaches, I mean, some things work at certain levels and then not at the other one, and vice versa, actually. So that's a really amazing way if you can do it, if you have a few hundred employees, certainly, and a few locations to do that. If you have many locations or you have thousands and thousands of people, that has its own challenges, but then you have other resources at your disposal to do that. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next, actually, is what strategies have you implemented to ensure that the voice of the employees are heard in the first place, right? Because again, we all know that some of the issues that are out there, but it starts with hearing their voices, because, you can't assume you know exactly what the challenges are. It's obviously pay and career advancement, things like that are important to everybody in any industry or any role. But sometimes, there's other things that you can do a lot about, even if you don't have flexibility around just giving people more money, or creating, if you're a smaller organization, how do you create more opportunity for them? But people can feel supported and really engaged in the organization, in other ways. So what strategies have you used? What have you found to be effective? So please include the ones that haven't worked, right? I think that's actually in some ways more interesting, because people are thinking of doing some things, and people tell us routinely, even when they listen to our recordings, they call and say, oh, I was about to do this, but I heard on your, on your webinar 6 months ago, you had that somebody tried this and it didn't work, and it made me think harder about what might work in our place better. So yeah, please share any experience of strategies that haven't worked so well.
Well, I did want to, go back to the scale.
Yes.
When you go from, one size to, a larger size, I think it is really, really critical for you to invest in your frontline leadership, because they become the direct contact of communication, administration, and accountability for the initiatives that you are rolling out. So, hearing from them, making sure that they have the resources, the training, that you're in constant contact with them, that you feel that their voices are heard for their team, right? Because they will be the ones to tell you that that's not going to work for my team. My team needs this, right? Or they'll tell you, oh, that's perfect for my team. That will work. Can we do more of that? Or they'll let you know what training specifically is needed. So I think investing and communicating and making sure that, yes, you have the all team meetings, but also having those frontline leadership meetings where you can actually communicate with them directly, where they have their kind of, time to be able to speak about their experience, what they need, and how we can be helpful as, HR professionals and senior leaders to, help them. So as you scale, investing in that frontline leadership is, is everything, what I've experienced. So as far as things that, that I've seen, when it comes to inadequate communication and engagement, after you've, received that survey, obviously low morale, right? And that directly impacts and hits your culture, because people are going to talk, they are going to share, and unfortunately, they'll even impact your new hires who are, fresh coming in. Those people are going to, tell you, okay, yes, you were hired, your interview was great. Let me tell you what's really going on here, right? Or unfortunately, they'll experience it themselves. So I think, the impact of inadequate communication, or when you're receiving those surveys and you're not sharing, you're not doing anything about it, and even the areas that you can't do something about immediately, still communicating why you can't do it, will create that low morale, not just for your frontline employees, but for everyone. It impacts everyone. And the impact of that obviously is also loss of production, right? When you have low morale, people really don't want to work. They're just kind of coming to get paid and doing what they can. They're not trying to do any more, but they will do less. So loss of production equals loss of time equals loss of money. So how I've showed up, I shared, training, that frontline leadership on emotional intelligence and coaching, and also listening skills, right? It's so important for leadership to know that when an employee comes to you with something, even if you feel like it's not important, or they may be magnifying something that's small, that you still need to hear it, and employee still wants to be heard. So it's acknowledging what they're saying, not writing it off as them being sensitive or not understanding, but making sure that you have that emotional intelligence and you're able to coach and share and walk the employee through their thoughts to maybe even help navigate them to the right, way that they should be thinking, because it could be off the rails, right? And then giving employees an avenue to share. One of the things that I do, like Jordan, I use Microsoft 365 as well. I've used Google as well, and Outlook, and all those other platforms. But I make sure that I, from 365, there's a bookings page that you can create. So I made sure, because we have multiple locations in multiple states, that my link to my bookings page is in my signature. I also created an HR site through 365, and the link to my site is also in my signature, right? So that way employees, as I email, and they use it quite often, but they'll, book me, it's in my signature. They'll, because often I created this website, I announced it, right? And people still were not using it. So I was like, well, I'm putting it in my signature. So every time you see an email, you're going to see that site there. You have access to the site, and you have access to book with me one-on-one. So using technology, I am a big fan of using multiple streams of communication. I will share with you in the town hall, I will email it to you, I will put it on our intranet, and then I'll share it again, right? And text it, right? So as many times and as many avenues that are available to share communication, especially if it's huge communication like benefit enrollment, I am not, because I want to be able to lay down my head at night and say, I did everything I could. There's not an angle that employee can come that I haven't, thought of because I listened, right? I listened and heard them say that, hey, we need it this way. We need text messages. We need you to actually come on site and sit, and help walk us through. We need some one-on-one time with you. So hearing that, and also, do the leaders know what is valuable to their teams, right? What's most important to them? Is it most important to them to have flexibility? Is it most important to them to know the rules and have the handbook posted? Is it most important to them to have open communication? So I think, and again, that goes into investing in those frontline leaders. And then, coaching leaders to have consistent and meaningful one-on-ones. When I first began to share with leaders and coach leaders on how to coach and how to have one-on-ones, oftentimes they thought it was a kind of a check the box thing, right? Where it's like, okay, I had a one-on-one with you, and then you find out they're just shooting a breeze, or they're addressing an issue, and they're not really, it's not a meaningful conversation about upskilling, about any type of training, about, any errors, about, wins, how can I help you? Am I being a good leader? All those things are missing from the conversation. So I think coaching leaders on how to truly mentor and have meaningful one-on-ones, and using the technology to actually enter that data so HR can see how those meetings are going, I think is very helpful as well. And then working with leaders on, succession planning, because oftentimes team members don't feel like, depending on the position, they feel like I have nowhere to go, right? And some of the positions, you don't have anywhere to go, and we need to be honest about that. But how can we provide training, upskilling, opportunities in those areas, and be honest with them about their role, but still invest in them? So
I love the what you're bringing up, Shauna, and giving several examples of areas where leaders really need training, coaching, help. Because often when you think of the background of leaders in these environments, especially, right? I mean, they were on the line themselves one day, and the next day, here you are now leading these people, right? And so it's really difficult. Or if they come from a different environment where they haven't been on the line themselves, it's even more difficult because they have no real understanding until you've actually been on the floor, right? And you've had, having come myself from a background where we had a huge, union and on the floor kind of environment, and the amount of time that I spent there, I think was some of the most valuable in my career, because it really gives you a true understanding of the limitations, the stress. When we talk about productivity in the office world, it's so different from productivity on the floor, because every day, every hour, right? And of course, some organizations have taken that to an extreme, like at Amazon, it's kind of famous or infamous maybe for how they track, people's productivity. So there's a lot of pressures there, and break time and what they do during that break time is very, it's very important to them, and it's very limited in what they can do. So when you say, oh, take your break time and maybe, answer the survey, that's like, no.
Right.
So investing in the leaders themselves, and what we found is, people are trained, and in that realm, is first of all, the training is time consuming, and there's one area that we haven't even talked about, like healthcare, like nurses and healthcare workers, at all levels. They don't have time to go, when you send them something to take 10 minutes or even, let alone 30 minutes or more. They have a minute, right? So we have actually thought about, training that, like micro learnings, right? We have this whole host of micro learnings, which are really 2-3 minutes, but they're very targeted. They're, again, around the areas of how do you train. And because when people talk about investing in leaders, one thing is the money, the other one is the time to take them away from the line or the environment in which they're managing others to then themselves be trained, right? So micro learnings we found is and we define that as being 2 to 3 minutes, is max, and it's video, it's very engaging, it's easy. And then how do you know how much of that they retained, right? Because they're in an environment all human beings actually forget what we are taught, or in a training environment, within a week, we forget 80% of it. Within 30 days, 90% of it. And this is just the forgetting curve. That's true for all humans. So how do you reinforce that? And again, the idea of maybe quick hit kind of knowledge checks and things like that comes into play. So I talk about what we're doing more than in our other sessions, just because this is very current in terms of thinking about this. And we found this to be a huge gap area where we're building a lot of these capabilities, because, it's just really it's astounding almost that the solutions most people have thought about is really works for the office environment to some extent. But for the frontline, the gap has been getting bigger and bigger, and the offerings and the solutions have not kept up with this widening gap. So anyway, so thank you for bringing that up about the leadership and how they need to be trained, and then you need to assess their understanding and their ability to change behavior and be more effective. So Ginger, I want to also jump to you and make sure, this conversation is fantastic, and this time always goes fast, but today I have like 5 questions, but we won't get to all of them, but it's okay. Maybe we'll have a follow-on with you all in the weeks and months that come, but I'm sure that'll happen. But Ginger, I want to, at least for sure, for this question of strategies that have worked or haven't worked in your environment, to hear from you.
Yeah, so add on to Shonda, we actually have quite a few people that have gone to from buddy to boss over the weekend, right? So they're on the line Friday and they're then the supervisor Monday. So we did this summer invest in some training for those leaders. And it was truly targeted as leadership training. And that went over well, but we also then did some internal training in terms of just being a supervisor on the line. Because we're listening to the hourly feedback, and that there seemed to be some disconnect, right, between the supervisor and the frontline employee, hourly employee. In terms of strategies we've implemented for the hourly frontline employees, they do have a daily huddle meeting online in their areas each morning. And they discuss any safety improvements or issues, production model changes, quality issues. Just get together for a few minutes, hear some feedback. We do have a suggestion program. People are then given awards for their suggestions that are implemented, so forth and so on. And then on the salaried side, in general, what we've done is then, from the employee engagement surveys, we've then created focus groups. Those focus groups have been assigned some of the hot topics, right? And they've drilled down those concerns, and then met with us, human resources and/or organizational development, leadership, and training. And we then communicate what some of those actions that we are taking to address their concerns. And that seems to have helped as well. So we'll be doing that again coming up. But I think the daily huddles have helped with the hourly employees. And then again, we did feel that we needed to invest in that frontline leadership as well, just as Shonda had mentioned.
That's fantastic. The training you did, the buddy to boss training, like that transition, how do you make that transition, right? Can you tell us about how that training was? Like, was this a classroom training? Was it online?
Yeah, so we used a third party for that. And a lot of it, so we didn't attend. It was literally just them. So it was just a classroom full of supervisors. And because they've been at work all day, we had 3 sessions. We limited the time of it, right? So they would stay engaged. And a lot of it focused on them as leaders and what kind of weather they create around them, right? And so a lot of people bring stuff from outside of AM General to AM General and create this weather, or they're then taking that outside of AM General and to, kind of realize, are they creating a hurricane? Are they creating, that's all I could envision. So we are looking forward to getting that just kind of all wrapped up here at the end of August, trying to get some feedback from the trainer. And then the training that my group has provided, that covers just being a supervisor every day at AM General in terms of following the collective bargaining agreement and what they are responsible on a daily basis from our perspective to be a supervisor in terms of, attendance tracking and paid time off and qualification and documentation, those sorts of things. So that was a series of 4 sessions as well.
I did also create, Ginger, I love the focus groups, and I love to hear that you all even have that buddy to boss training because, we've had several promotions here and, in past and companies that I've led where I actually did create that internal training because people, organizations will promote you and say, all right, now we promoted you because you were, you were a great worker and we thought you had leadership potential. So now go and lead, right?
Yeah.
And if you have any problems, come and let us know. Like,
Yeah.
right. So, so I did create, the training, because now you're a leader, like you said, leave of absences, how are you now going to work with HR, recruiting, all those things. You now have access to these systems. What does it look like, but also emotional intelligence, what weather are you creating? I love that, and just how should you handle, crucial conversations, conflict, performance leadership. What does that truly look like? Coaching and mentoring. What is it? What is it not? And how can HR help you along the way, right? So not just throwing them in to say, hey, we saw you have potential, figure it out. But I think they always need that transition conversation to be able to, number one, know that they are supported in their new role and they now have resources and tools to carry it out successfully. But HR, of course, is here to, help them along the way. It's just wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That is, those are really great ideas as you highlighted them, and thank you for sharing how you've been doing that. I do want to give an opportunity for anyone who wants to ask questions while we also share the, as we promised, the SHRM recertification credits here that you can see on the screen now. But we do have a question actually, and there's more questions. We'll just see how many we can get through, but please add your questions. How do you manage to get feedback? I mean, some of this we've talked about, but if there's any, I would put it in this way, of everything we've talked about in terms of answering this question, the most important aspect of it that you want to reinforce in terms of how do you manage to get feedback from frontline workers, the most effective way that you've found, right? And then also sharing out the findings, in an environment where it's unionized. They say, I feel like engagement is sometimes not authentic, and it could be a lot of red tape to actively engage the front line.
Well, I think it's tough, right? So we have a start time and end time, some break times, there's collective bargaining language to follow. And so I think you need to be transparent, consistent, and communicate why. Are we doing it just to do it because someone says so, or why are we doing it, right? Why do we want your feedback? And from your feedback, we will take action and then take the action and follow up. So I think as long as you are transparent and consistent and can show that you are. Now, can you do everything? No. Can you spend, do you have this limitless budget? No. So I think it helps. We have a quarterly town hall with our president, and he comes on site and talks to everybody about the state of the business and things going on. And then we also have a communication from him weekly that we do distribute as well.
Yeah, and there's no substitute for that. And I'll tell you, just having been in an environment with a very large union presence, and you know, we had to do something very hard. We had to change, go outside of the collective bargaining rules and do some things put people off-site and do the schedules a little bit, parallel them a little bit more for the double V striker program that we were when we were in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And frankly, opting, just explaining the why, I think is really important to union leadership, and co-opting them. This is something we need to solve together, was a really helpful thing. At the end of the day, I think all these challenges can be overcome with more communication with leadership. Unfortunately, we're at the top of the hour. We have to leave it here. But thank you so much. I think we'll definitely have a follow-on on this. And for the audience, thank you so much for joining us. Again, this is a recorded session. You'll be able to see it later on as well if you missed anything. And stay in touch with us. You can always email us. Mine is sonia@OurOffice.io with a Y, Sonia. And I'm happy to connect you with any of our panelists and see if they're interested in continuing the conversation. But thanks again. We really appreciate it, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.